Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're zeroing in on what are arguably the most crucial 6 years in the life of George Washington, 1781 to 1787. We're going to skip the usual long introductions and dive straight into the drama, because this is a story about ultimate victory, for sure, but even more importantly, it's about profound virtue.
So think about this for a second. What does a man do when he achieves absolute power? It's a pretty profound question, right? We're setting the stage here for a story that isn't just about winning battles. It's really about the totally unprecedented, revolutionary restraint of one single man, and how his choices literally shape the modern world.
Here is our timeline. 1781, victory at Yorktown. 1783, the Treaty of Paris and his resignation. And 1787, the Constitutional Convention. We'll be tracking this rapid succession of world-changing events across a really tight 6-year window.
Section 1. The Siege of Yorktown. Defeating an empire.
Okay, let's transport ourselves right to the climax of a grueling 6-year war. Picture it, October 1781, out on the Yorktown Peninsula in Virginia. The Continental Army has been through absolute hell, freezing cold, starvation, death. But now, the end is actually in sight. And it wasn't some chaotic, glorious charge. It was a brilliant, calculated siege. Look at how these pieces fit together like a giant puzzle. Washington perfectly coordinated his continental forces with the French army, led by General Rochambeau, and the French naval fleet under Admiral de Grasse. And the British fleet that was supposed to save the day turned completely back at the Battle of the Chesapeake. Washington had perfectly trapped British General Charles Cornwallis. Nowhere to go, no escape, and absolutely zero rescue coming.
As the British finally marched out to surrender on October 19th, their band famously played a tune called The World Turned Upside Down. And honestly, that hit the nail on the head. A ragged rebel army of farmers had just defeated the single greatest military empire on Earth. But Washington, watching the surrender from horseback, he didn't cheer. He wasn't pumping his fist in the air. His face remained totally solemn, completely still. You know, in that moment, he was carrying the heavy weight of every single fallen soldier who died to make this completely impossible victory a reality.
Section 2. The Ultimate Test of Power. The Question of 1783.
Fast forward a bit to September 1783. The Treaty of Paris is signed, formally recognizing the United States of America as a free, independent nation. Now, this leaves Washington in an incredibly unique and, frankly, dangerous position. He suddenly holds the most powerful position on the entire continent, backed by an army that is deeply, personally loyal to him. If we look back, every victorious conqueror in history before him took that kind of power and turned it into a dictatorship, a kingship, or a permanent military rule. He could have done anything, literally anything, but look at what actually happened: a voluntary resignation and a quiet return to civilian farming. No way, right? But it's true.
Section 3. The Surrender of Power at Annapolis, Maryland. Let's just slow down for a second and really appreciate the sheer historical weight of this moment. It's December 23, 1783. Washington walks into the Maryland State House and stands before the assembled Congress of the United States. The room goes dead silent. Every single person in there understood the gravity of what was about to go down. He says to them, "Having now finished the work assigned to me, I retire from the great theater of action." He held his commission, the exact document that gave him absolute command of the entire army, in both hands. Witnesses actually saw his hands slightly trembling as he placed that document on the podium, bowed, and simply took his leave. He just gave the power back. And the reaction from across the ocean? It's just astounding. When King George III of England heard that Washington was voluntarily resigning his military commission to go back to private life, he reportedly said, "If he does that, he will be the greatest man in the world." Just think about that for a second. Walking away from unchecked absolute power was entirely without precedent in all of recorded human history, but he did it, and he was.
Section 4. A Citizen at Peace. The Return to Mount Vernon.
So, after 8 grueling years of warfare, Washington got exactly what he wanted. He went home to Mount Vernon in Virginia to finally just be a guy at peace, returning to his wife Martha and the land he loved so much. His days were filled with walking the fields of his farm, studying crop rotations, and, writing letters to friends about the price of wheat, the whole shebang of country life. But here's the crucial point. While Washington was enjoying a few precious years as a citizen at peace, the fragile nation he had risked everything to create was rapidly falling apart. The Articles of Confederation were failing miserably. 13 states were constantly bickering, debts were going unpaid, and Shays' Rebellion was violently shaking Massachusetts to its core. The country was basically failing before it had truly begun.
Section 5. Forging the Constitution.
The return to duty.
Well, this mounting crisis forces him to make an incredibly difficult choice. He has to step out of his beloved retirement to try and save the American experiment all over again. Let's move to 1787. 55. That's the number of delegates who gathered for 4 months in Philadelphia. Their monumental task? To try and build a workable government completely from scratch.
Now, Washington agreed to preside over these debates. Actually, he rarely spoke during the convention. But he didn't need to. His mere presence in that room was a massive statement, because he had already proven, beyond a shadow of a doubt, that he would walk away from absolute power. His undeniable character was really the only reason that delegates trusted this new system at all. They knew whatever government they designed, he was going to be its first leader. His proven integrity guaranteed the entire experiment and heavily influenced the separation of powers and the checks and balances they debated.
And that brings us to the result. The U.S. Constitution, an unprecedented government built not around the power of one man, but around the rights of every man. Now, it was an imperfect document, as all human things are, but profoundly real. When you read it, you can literally see the invisible fingerprints of Washington's restraint on every single page. He had given up his farm, his comfort, his years for this, and now here it was.
Which leaves us with his final thought to ponder. How often in history does a leader choose the republic over himself every single time? It's a staggering question, isn't it? The incredible rarity of such civic virtue and leadership is exactly why we're still talking about him today. It's why his face is on the dollar in your pocket. Because when the ultimate moments came, he chose to be a citizen, not a king. Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer, and I really hope it leaves you thinking deeply about the true nature of power and restraint. Catch you next time.